Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Bava Batra, pages 12 through 18. Yudbet 12. Chacham adif min avi. A sage is greater than a prophet. Shneimar, as it says in the pasuk, v'navi levav chochma, and the prophet shall get a heart of wisdom. Minit lebemi. Who is compared to who by way of analogy? Hayomer katanit lebegadol. The lesser is compared to the greater, which means that in this pasuk, the Navi is the katan, the lesser, and the Chacham is the gadol, the greater. And the Navi is being compared to the Chacham who is greater than him. Now, why would the Gemara say something like this? I mean, prophecy is pretty special. Why would we poo-poo it in comparison to learning? And the answer is that we're in a post-prophetic era. We do not have Nevi'im anymore, and the Jewish people need to be reassured that our leadership is not substandard or subpar. So it comes along the Gemara to give us this reassuring message that our Chachamim are wonderful manhigim, wonderful leaders, and possibly even greater than, on greater standing than the Nevi'im of yesteryear. 13. Yud Gimel. Tanu Rabbanan. Marbik Adam Torah Nevi'im Ktuvim Ke'echad Divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to collate, sort of glue together in one package, the Tanakh, the books of Torah, books of the prophets, the Nevi'im, and the writings, the Ktuvim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Torah b'fnei atzma, Nevi'im b'fnei atzman, Ktuvim b'fnei atzman. No, you can't do that. It has to be each of the three divisions of the Tanakh must be kept separate. The Torah is its one thing, the Nevi'im collectively are another, and the Ktuvim collectively are a third. And you cannot mix and match. Third, last possibility is Chachamim Omrim, Kol echad b'fnei atzmo. The sages say each book must be its own book. That you shall not have a common book of Nevi'im and a common book of Ktuvim, but rather Yoshua is its own thing, Shmuel is its own thing, Malachim, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel, whatever it might be, Treasar. That is the practice. If you go to the synagogues that have of the 24 Kitvei HaKodesh, if they have all of them, they'll have each one a separate entity, separate scroll for each of the books. Yud Daled, 14. Mi Ketavan. Who wrote the books of the Bible? So the Gemara here in Bava Batra is discussing who wrote each one of the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible. Moshe Katav, what did Moses write? Sifro, his book. What is Moses' book? The answer is the Chumash, the Torah, the Chamisha Chumashei Torah, the 5 books of Moses. He wrote his book, Uparshat Bilam, and the story of Bilam. Now, wait a second. Why is it necessary for the Gemara to say that Moshe wrote the section of Bilam, which we know as Parshat Balak in the book of Bamidbar, chapter 22 through 25? If that's part of the Torah, we already said Moshe wrote the Torah. So what do we need to be told that he wrote Parshat Bilam? The answer is that you might have thought that Bilam is a section that Moshe couldn't possibly have known. Because if you read the story, the Jews are not involved. The Israelites are not involved. They're at a distance. They're 10 miles away. The camp is visible from a far peak. But how does Moshe know to write Vayar Balak ben Sipor, that whole story, if he was not a part of it? The answer is by prophetic inspiration. So lest you have thought that he wasn't the author, no, he was the author of that as well. And he wrote the book of Iyov, the book of Job. Yoshua, what did Yoshua write? Sifro, his book, the book of Joshua, and 8 verses of the Torah. Which 8 verses? The final 8 verses, which address the death and burial of Moshe. Why are we suggesting that it was Yoshua who wrote it? Because how could Moshe have written if he was dead? Moshe may be the author of Torah, but you can't write about something after you're no longer alive. And so, perforce, Yoshua was the author of the last 8 psukim. 15, Tedvav. Iyov b'mei meraglim hava. When was Iyov alive? It's unclear from the book of Job when it takes place. One speculation is he was around in the days of the Meraglim. One says Iyov me'ole Golaya. He was among those who went back to the land of Israel from the Babylonian captivity, meaning in the 6th century before the Common Era, in the days of Zerubbabel. Iyov b'mei Moshe hava. Some say Moshe. He was in the days of Moses. But lastly, and most importantly, Iyov lo haya v'lo nivra l'mashal haya. Iyov was never alive. He was never born. He's not a real person. The whole story of Job is a parable. This is a very important thing for the Gemara to say, because the Gemara only very rarely would suggest the lack of historicity for the stories of the Tanakh. It's a sort of a maverick or bold position to stake out that this was merely a mashal and not a live human being. Tet Zayin, 16. Amaresh Lakish. Hu Satan, Hu Yetzer Hara, Hu Malach HaMavet. So this is a very famous Talmudic dictum that the 3 things, the Satan, the accusatory angel, okay, So the entity up in the Shamayim, that is the prosecutor in the heavenly court, the Satan, is one thing. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination in our heart, in our souls, to get us to do the wrong thing, it's the second thing. Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, which takes our soul when it's time for us to die, a third thing. Don't think of them as three separate entities, but rather, what are they? One and the same. They're all the same thing. Okay. Yud Zayin, 16. Tana Rabbanan. Arba metu be'etyo shel Nachash. 4 people died only because of the episode of the primordial snake. The episode in Gan Eden with Adam and Chava and the Nachash, in which the people sinned because the Nachash seduced them, and as a result of that, death comes into the world. So the Gemara here is suggesting everybody does something wrong, everybody sins at one point or another, and is deserving, therefore, of punishment of death. But 4 people were totally righteous and would have lived forever had it not been for the fact that man has mortality courtesy of the snake episode. Who were these 4 people? Binyamin, the son of Yaakov, Amram, the father of Moshe, Yishai, the father of David, and Kilav, the son of David. So 4 heroes of the Jewish people, some more famous than others. Obviously, of the 4, Kilav is the least famous, but they were perfectly righteous and only died because of man's mortality courtesy of the Genesis story. Yurchet, 18. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Nizak Archik Metatzmo. If there is a real possibility of danger, of damages occurring, because you see a collision is about to occur, who's the main party responsible for avoiding damage that is yet to occur but is on the verge of occurring? Rabbi Yossi says, Al Hanizak. The party that's about to be injured must proactively get themselves out of the way and avoid being harmed. You have to, enlighten self-interest. Chachamim omrim, however, the sages say, the party that is about to commit the act of damaging needs to hold themselves back. The car that's going over the speed limit, whatever it might be, they have to protect their financial interests by not engaging in a reckless act of endangerment of others. So, whose responsibility is it? Machlokas Rabbi Yossi Chachamim. I would argue both parties have, a certain moral responsibility. Whether financial responsibility in the law, that's the machloket. But the moral sense, you don't want to get hurt, you don't want to hurt others. Everyone have a great week.